This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to our second episode of our series about Brazil and the state of the harvest, given the interesting challenges that we had in the past few years with the crops in Brazil. I am joined once again by Jonas Ferraresso. Hi, Jonas. Welcome back again.
Hi.
Now, in the last episode, we talked about the 20 and the 2021 harvests. And in this episode, we are going to talk about the 2022 harvest. So where we left off in the last episode was that the frost that happened in July last year in Brazil happened 3 times. Do you want to just go through geographically, very generally, what the influences of that frost were?
The frost, it's a very cold mass of air that came from the south of the world. And then as it's passed through the country, for example, it happens in Brazil and Argentina and some place in Bolivia too, because it's a huge mass. But usually people just in the coffee chain look more for Brazil because of the importance of the harvest in Brazil. But many places in Bolivia, I think in Peru too, had a problem with the frost, because a huge mass of cold there. So when it passed through Brazil, they like make a line. It's like, for people that understand better, it's like a hurricane when we have the path. Right. It works in the same way. So is the path of the frost, and the path hits the states that have coffee of Paraná, which is in the south of Brazil. The São Paulo state is in the southwest, and Minas Gerais state, which is the biggest state that produces coffee in Brazil, which is in the southwest too. So then after that, the frost go to the sea and start to dissipate, because it's like the hurricane too. It's getting weaker as far they go. So, but before that, they hit important areas in Brazil, like Cerrado, which is the area that produces a huge amount of coffee, and the south of the Minas Gerais, which is the area that produces a lot of coffee too. So that worried farmers, and many lost everything, and many just saw the problem in September when the blossom did not come as expected.
So the 3 frost events that happened, were they equal events?
The second one was the worst. The third one, we had a luck to have some rain. So if the humidity goes up, the effects of frost should be so much lower than less than if the humidity was very low. The frost need the cold temperature, the cold mass air, and low humidity levels to damage the coffee trees.
And this is where technology really does come in, right? Because whenever we talk about technology, we think of machinery and digital technology and things like that. I was following you very closely, and I was following my friend Felipe from FAF, and the technology you guys were trying to implement to help the farms survive this time was really old school technology, right? But it was still technology. Do you want to talk a little bit about the kinds of things you were doing to protect the plants from the frost?
Yeah, the Brazil faced many frost events when the coffee was just growing in a state in the very south of Brazil called Paraná, which still have coffee, but so much less than before. So in the 60s and 70s, they faced many frost events. So they start to study what a kind of stuff we could do for that. And then they developed some techniques, which it could be when we have young trees, we could put dirt over, like
You
like
bury them, right?
yeah, yeah, they bury them because it's like a blanket.
Yeah.
Like you put a blanket over
That was
the
so nuts to see you
tree.
guys burying the
Yeah,
plants. You're like,
yeah.
oh, well, they'll be fine.
So we could bury the plants, and if we have bigger one, we use the fog technique that we use like splinters of wood chips
Uh huh.
and with one kind of salt, which called calcium nitrate,
Okay.
which make a lot of fog. And then we have like
Like a blanket?
environmental, yeah, like which avoid that the cold goes down. Is like
Wow.
it's a controlled fire, like a fire, because we have this hot temperatures, because the frost press the hot air instead of going up. So we saw like a beautiful fog in about
Wow.
2 meters high that protect all the area. And we use that in some farmers, helped in many cases, but we have places that we have -4 Celsius. So in that case, it's like try to hit Alaska. It's impossible because it's
Right.
too much cold. So when we are close to 0 Celsius degrees, these techniques works fine. But we have like -4. It's too much cold. In some areas they have that. And the last technique that people use, it's put bags in the young trees. You know, paper bags that we
Oh,
have in
wow.
groceries.
Yeah.
So I saw fields, like huge fields, with many coffee bag, many
Paper
paper
bags.
bags. Yeah, in each seedling. And so they put one by one and put a tie
Yep.
underneath, because we have like a hot air and hot humidity, because the young tree the water goes to the leaves. I
The
forget the word in English.
humidity. The
Yeah, they
humidity
yeah, so we have a
and
humidity
condensation.
environmental inside this bag, and then could keep the trees alive during the frost event too.
So the ecosystem inside the bag was
Yeah,
protecting it from outside. Wow,
yeah,
that's
because it's very
fantastic.
wet, and we have like a blanket too that
Yep.
keep the warm inside. So if we have a high humidity, usually it keeps the temperature close to 0 degrees, and the coffee could resist until -1.6 degrees.
Okay.
So if we keep zero, the coffee tree could survive too.
So what was it like in those nights when you knew there was going to be frost? I imagine nobody got any sleep and you guys stayed
Mhm.
up watching the temperature. Is that what it was like?
Yeah, because to do in the case of the paper bag, the coffee farmers needs to do in advance.
Hmm.
But the fog is something that we could monitor along the night,
Okay.
because if the temperature do not reach the critical level, we don't need to do nothing, because in areas of adult coffee, we need many and many barrels of
Yeah.
this wood chips and the nitrates, the salt, and then we need to fire up all and keep monitoring, because we don't want fire. We just want the smoke. So it's a lot of work to do. And so we monitor if the temperature reach the critical level in 4 a.m., which is very close to 0 degrees. The farmers start to fire up all the barrels. Some places I need to put like uh, uh, 25 barrels in many strategic places, because there is a right place to put the barrel, to see how the foggy will walk in the ground. So we fire up everything and monitor thanks to today the thermometer is a very cheap equipment, so we have many in the fields, so it's easier now to understand how temperatures goes along the night. But the farmers and me stay awake all night checking it's the frost, or how it's happening, and if the farmers need something, I stay awake to them to reach me during the night.
How many farms were you looking after in that
for
time?
frost, 4.
That's
because
intense.
4 farmers was in the critical areas, but some farmers was not in the critical areas. So just this 4 I was following all night.
Yeah, wow. In the next episode, what I would love to find out and ask you is at what level, and I think this is important for everyone to understand, it's not just that frost comes and it burns off the leaves. There's different levels of damage that was done to the trees. And I think it's important for us to understand, given the interest of what we're trying to do on this podcast is to help inform people of exactly what it means when things like frost affect coffee plants. So in the next episode, let's talk about exactly what kind of damage was done and how that's resulted in what's going to show up in this harvest. How does that sound?
Fine, perfect.
Awesome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. See you in the next episode and have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.